It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang with a number I hadn't saved but still recognized. I almost didn't answer. Then I heard her voice. "Soraya, it's your mother." 3 words, and my stomach tightened. She sounded brighter than I remembered. "Your anniversary's next weekend, right?" Harlan and I were thinking. "We could watch the kids. You and Kale deserve a night out." I didn't respond right away. In the 6 years since Elowen was born, my parents had never once offered to babysit. Not when the twins came early and I needed help walking. Not when Kale's father had surgery and we had to fly out on short notice. Not even for a single date night. "You want to babysit?" I asked carefully. "Of course. It's time we were more involved." Her tone was too casual, too smooth. It made me feel off balance. When I told Kale later that night, he looked up from peeling carrots with narrowed eyes. "Your parents. The ones who didn't show up for Elowen's preschool graduation because it wasn't worth the drive?" I nodded. She called it stepping up. Said we deserve a night off. He didn't say anything for a while. Just kept slicing. "And you believe her, I don't know?" I said. But part of me wants to. The part that still missed having a mother. The part that wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd realized what she'd missed. Kale wiped his hands and leaned against the counter. "I'll go along with it, but only if we make a plan." That night, I lay awake listening to the twins' soft breathing through the monitor. My mother hadn't asked what they liked to eat. She hadn't asked about bedtime, just offered help as if the past 6 years hadn't happened, and still I said yes. When Elowen was born, I texted my mother from the hospital bed. She responded 2 days later with a thumbs-up emoji. "Glad everything went okay," she added. "No visit, no call, just that." I told myself she was overwhelmed, that maybe it was hard for her to see me become a mother when she hadn't really finished being one herself. I made excuses so I wouldn't have to feel the truth. When the twins Bram and Jory took their first wobbly steps across the living room, Kale's parents were there clapping and filming with trembling hands. Odette and Harlan had been invited. They'd RSVP'd with silence. It became a pattern: birthdays, school plays, Saturday visits that never happened. Invitations met with absence, followed by long stretches of nothing. I used to send photo updates, little collages of milestones, messy faces, and wonky drawings. Then one day I stopped. I couldn't pinpoint when, but I know it was after Elowen asked, "Do Grandma and Grandpa not like us?" That night, I sat on the porch while Kale rocked Jory back to sleep. He joined me, cradling the monitor, and asked gently, "Why do you keep trying?" "Because I want to believe they care," I said. "Because they're my parents." He reached over and covered my hand with his. "Hope is good. But if you're not careful, it turns into a kind of self-harm." I didn't respond. I just stared out at the dark yard where the porch light made small islands of warmth on the grass. I hated that he might be right. I hated even more that part of me still hoped this babysitting offer was real, that maybe finally they wanted to show up for something. So when Odette texted the next day confirming Saturday at 6, I replied, "Thank you," and added a smiley face I didn't feel. They showed up at 6 on the dot. I actually checked the time twice, thinking maybe my phone was fast. Odette wore a coral blouse I hadn't seen before, bright and cheerful. She was holding a plastic container of something vaguely sweet-smelling. Harlan trailed behind a faded duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Homemade lemon bars," Odette announced as she stepped into the foyer. I knew the grocery store packaging when I saw it, even if she'd tried to disguise it with wax paper. Still, I nodded and took them. Kale helped Bram tie his sneakers while Elowen proudly gave her grandfather a tour of the living room, pointing out where she'd hung her latest drawing. Harlan smiled politely, but his eyes kept flicking toward the hallway. He set the duffel down near the coat rack, then shifted slightly, almost unconsciously, so he stood in front of it. I noticed. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe it just had his pajamas and a toothbrush. Maybe he was embarrassed that the bag was so worn. Still, I kept catching him glancing at it while Odette praised the houseplants and asked Elowen which twin was more spirited. We'd already laid out bedtime instructions on the fridge. Kale had reviewed the emergency contacts twice. Odette nodded along, insisting they remembered what it was like to have young kids. "We raised you, didn't we?" she said with a small laugh, sipping the tea I'd made. I smiled too, but it didn't reach my chest. Something about Harlan's posture was off. Too stiff, too present, as if guarding something instead of settling in. Cale was zipping up his coat and nudging me gently toward the door when Odette said, "Don't worry about a thing. We've got them." I looked over my shoulder. Harlan's hand was resting on the duffel's handle. He didn't move. He didn't smile. We were almost out the door when Cale noticed the bag still sitting awkwardly in the hallway. "Want me to put this in the guest room for you?" he asked casually already, bending down to grab the handle. No Harlan barked louder than necessary. He stepped forward, hand outstretched, but Cale had already lifted the bag. "It's fine," Cale said, blinking. "Just trying to help." Harlan took another step, but Odette grabbed his wrist. "Let it go," she hissed. Cale gave me a look, one I knew well. Calm on the surface, calculating just beneath. He set the bag down on the bench and unzipped it. Then everything stopped. He froze first. His shoulders locked. His breath caught like he'd swallowed ice. Then he turned to me, voice low, too steady. "Get the kids. Call 911. I didn't move. "What now, Soraya?" I stepped forward and looked inside. There were coils of rope, 2 rolls of duct tape, a half-used bottle of children's Benadryl, 3 smaller prescription bottles with labels torn off, and at the bottom a handgun wrapped in a hand towel. Nestled beside it, 3 tiny suitcases, 1 pink with stars, 1 blue with dinosaurs, 1 green with rocket ships, each labeled in block letters Elowen, Bram, Jory. My mouth dried instantly. "What is this?" I whispered. My voice didn't sound like mine. Odette's expression cracked. "You're overreacting." Harlan raised his hands slightly. "Let us explain." Cale stepped between them and the stairs, his whole body humming with tension. "Stay right where you are." I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. I could hear the twins laughing upstairs. Elawan humming to herself in the playroom. Odette took a step toward me. "Soraya, don't be foolish." I backed away. "My name is Soraya Wren Vale. My parents are in my home with weapons and sedatives. Please send police immediately." The dispatcher asked me something, but I didn't hear it. I could only stare at the bag, at the quiet, unassuming duffel that had been sitting there all evening waiting. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking for my address, the nature of the emergency, whether anyone was injured. I gave her the details in pieces, my throat dry, the words catching on the way out. She told me officers were en route. Harlan moved first. He stepped toward the stairs, toward the kids. Cale blocked him with both arms out. "Don't," he said. "Don't take another step." Harlan froze. His face had changed, no longer startled, but calculating. Cold. "You don't understand what we're trying to do." "You brought rope," Cale said. "And drugs." I added, my voice trembling, now loud with disbelief. "And a gun." "You brought a gun into my house." Odette's mouth twitched. "For protection," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "From who I asked. From anyone who would try to stop us from doing what's right." "What's right?" I echoed. I stepped between them and the stairs. "What exactly were you planning?" Odette's eyes glistened. "They deserve to know who we are. They deserve time with us. Real time, not filtered through your judgment. So you were going to take them?" I asked, quieter now. "Without telling us, we left a note," Harlan said. "It's in the side pocket." Cale bent down, pulled out a folded piece of paper. His face crumpled as he read. Then he handed it to me. "We're taking what's ours. You've had them long enough. Don't try to stop us." Odette was crying now, but it was twisted more rage than remorse. "You turned them against us. You let her parents be the only ones they know." I stared at her. "You had 6 years. "Pity invitations," Harlan snapped. "Always on your terms. We were never truly welcome." Sirens began wailing in the distance. Cale and I didn't move. We stood between them and the children. "I don't care if you think it was justified," I said. "You packed up drugs and rope and child-sized luggage. You were ready to disappear with them." "We weren't going to hurt them," Odette whispered. "You already have," I said. The red and blue lights splashed across our front windows. Tires screeched in the driveway. The front door swung open as officers flooded in with guns raised. The moment the police entered, Harlan stepped forward, trying to assert himself. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, holding his hands out, palms up. "We're their grandparents. We're allowed to be here." An officer moved past him and pointed to the bag. "Is this yours? I packed it," Harlan said. "We were just staying the night." Odette was crying now, her shoulders shaking as she clung to the edge of the entry table. "This is absurd," she gasped. "We were just trying to spend time with our grandchildren." "That's not a crime." Cale stood silently by the stairs, his arms out like a gate. I watched one of the officers unzip the bag, fully pulling items out one by one. The rope, the tape, the bottles, the gun. The officer looked at us. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" I handed him the note, the one from the side pocket. The words were neat, deliberate, typed in all caps. "We're taking what's ours." "You've had them long enough. Don't try to stop us." The officer's jaw tightened. He passed it to his partner. Another officer gently moved Odette to the side as she wailed something about betrayal. "She's always been like this," Odette snapped, gesturing at me. "Ungrateful, closed off. We tried to love her and she shut us out, and now she's poisoning our grandchildren too." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Harlan's voice cut through her sobs. "You've given her too much power," he told the officers. "We're their blood. That should mean something." "That's not how this works," one officer replied, already pulling zip ties from his belt. "We didn't intend to hurt anyone." Harlan insisted, his voice rising now. "We just wanted time. Time away from this twisted version of a family she built." Cale let out a low breath. "You were going to drug them," Odette screamed. "They wouldn't have even remembered. We would have made it easy, gentle. We were saving them from what I wanted to ask, from bedtime stories and backyard sprinklers, from being loved in a way that didn't need obedience as proof. Instead, I just stepped back and let the officers do their job. As they led them out, I caught Harlan's eyes. For a second, I saw something flicker there, not remorse, not regret, just injury, as if we'd wronged him by stopping it. After they were gone, one officer stayed behind. He sat us down, asked questions, took photos, collected evidence. Upstairs, Alawan peeked out of her room, eyes wide and scared. I scooped her into my arms. "It's okay," I whispered. "We're safe now." But as I held her, I realized something sharp in my chest. They hadn't come for a visit. They'd come for a removal, a replacement, a rescue, as they called it, one we were never meant to return from. The next day, a detective named Alvarez sat at our kitchen table with a laptop open and a growing pile of documents spread between us. His face remained steady, but the way he tapped his pen made it clear he was holding back disgust. "They'd planned this for months," he said, turning the screen toward me. "There was a rental agreement for a property in New Mexico, 6 months paid up front under Odette's maiden name. It wasn't a condo, as they'd claimed. It was an isolated ranch house 45 minutes from the nearest grocery store. We found a storage unit in their name," Alvarez added. "Inside were survival supplies, school books, and a second set of suitcases. Bigger, adult-sized. No return tickets, no forwarding address." I stared at the screen but couldn't seem to blink. He clicked again. They also searched for "how to make children forget trauma" and "legal homeschooling in countries without U.S. extradition." I pressed my hands flat on the table to keep them from trembling. "We've also recovered 3 fake passports, the kids' photos, different names, different birthdays." He slid the folder toward me. I didn't want to look, but I did. Alawan was Catherine. Bram was Michael. Jory was David. They'd renamed them, rewritten their beginnings. They hadn't just intended to disappear with our children, they intended to rewrite who they were. "They never planned to bring them back," Cale said quietly. Alvarez nodded. "Everything we found supports that." I thought of the suitcases, of Elowen's scribbled drawings on the fridge, of the boys' toothbrushes side by side, of how all of it would have been gone overnight, replaced by silence and a note that dared to call them theirs. Odette hadn't just wanted to steal time, she wanted to steal identity, to raise them again, this time right. Without me. without us. Alvarez packed up his things and promised to keep us updated as the case moved forward. That night, I sat on the floor outside the kids' room long after they were asleep, unable to move. I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if Cale hadn't opened that bag. They were never going to just borrow our children. They were going to erase us, and they'd nearly succeeded. The trial started 3 months later. By then, the kids were sleeping through the night again, and we had changed every lock in the house. Still, I flinched every time the phone rang unexpectedly. In the courtroom, Odette looked smaller than I remembered, hair pulled back, tight wrists, limp in her lap. She cried often. Her lawyer painted her as a grieving, misunderstood grandmother who made a terrible mistake out of love. "I just wanted to be a real grandmother," she said on the stand, dabbing at her eyes. "They never let us in. We were always on the outside." Her voice trembled, but I heard no regret, just injury. Then it was Harlan's turn. He stood tall, chin up, unshaken. "They carry my name," he said. "They are mine. This family, she built this boundary she drew around us that's not natural. A man has a right to his blood." The prosecutor didn't flinch. She laid out the evidence clearly, the fake passports, the typed note, the premeditated drug use. She showed the jury what I already knew: this wasn't a breakdown. It was a plan. When I was called to testify, I focused on the facts. I didn't cry. I spoke for my children, not my anger. I described the bag, the way Harlan stood in front of it, the look in Cale's eyes when he unzipped it, the way Odette reached for me, not in apology, but in entitlement. "They didn't ask," I said plainly. "They took." The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts: attempted kidnapping, possession of controlled substances, firearm possession with criminal intent. Sentencing would come later. The courtroom emptied slowly, people whispering around us. Cale took my hand in the hallway, but I couldn't look at him. I stared down the long corridor instead, past the buzzing lights and peeling paint. I'd spent so much of my life trying to make them proud, trying to be something they could finally love. But all along, they hadn't wanted me. They'd wanted control. Even now, they couldn't see what they'd broken. And I finally understood: if they had never seen me as a daughter, they could never have seen my children as anything but trophies. 2 years have passed, but the weight of that night hasn't dissolved. It's just shifted. Alawan still checks the door locks before bed every night without fail. She calls it her superpower. We let her. We don't talk about why she started. The twins, now 5, barely remember any of it. Sometimes I envy that kind of forgetting. We never moved. Cale and I talked about it once, but ultimately we stayed. We changed the locks, added cameras, and repainted every hallway. There's a comfort in reclaiming the same space they tried to invade. Letters still arrive from the prison, always addressed in Odette's handwriting, sometimes a postcard, sometimes 10 pages. I used to read the first few lines. Now I don't even open them. Cale burns them in the backyard without a word. Last month I visited my cousin Mirelle. We hadn't spoken in years. She moved to Colorado when she was 19 to get away from Harlan's grip. I asked her about him, about what he was like when she was little. She didn't hesitate. He thought people were meant to be bent into usefulness. He saw family like land, something to inherit and control. I wasn't useful, so I left. It struck me that she didn't speak with bitterness, just clarity, a calm kind of survival. I envied that too. When I got home that evening, Cale was in the garden with Jory and Bram, helping them pull carrots from the soil. Elowen sat nearby with a book, her legs tucked under her like her father's. I watched them from the porch and let the stillness settle in. The truth is, I don't miss my parents anymore. I miss the idea of them, the version I used to carry around like a secret. The idea that maybe someday they'd see me not just their own reflection, that they'd choose love over legacy. They didn't. And I'm learning how to live with that. Because some stories end in fire, and some end in silence, letters, unopened names no longer spoken. We don't dress up or make reservations anymore. Our anniversary doesn't come with champagne or candlelight. It comes with pancakes, quiet walks, and all 3 kids piled into our bed before noon. Cale calls it our family anchor day. I think of it as the day we remembered what matters and what doesn't. This morning, Bram helped crack eggs into the bowl and spilled most of the shells. Jory insisted on carrying the juice pitcher and soaked his socks. Elowen sat in the sunroom after breakfast, sketching a picture of our backyard. She drew us all holding hands. She made the trees taller than the house. I sat with her while she shaded the sky. She didn't ask about my parents. She hasn't in a long time. I think about the bag sometimes. The one that sat at our door like a gift, quiet and unassuming. The one that carried the truth. People think evil looks loud, that it storms in shouting. But sometimes it arrives early, smiling, with lemon bars and promises. Elawan looked up at me as she colored. "Do you like it?" she asked. I did. I loved it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. Later we planted a fig tree in the yard. The twins named it Captain. I don't know why, but it's growing already stubborn and green and alive. That's what this day is now. Not a celebration of marriage, but of presence, of choosing every day to protect what we build.